ready to proceed. First of all, I would like to welcome you all for being here, because this is very, very important for the Irvinestown community. Don't tell me that, no, it's still working. And Diane Little will commence proceedings, giving her contribution. Right, Diane.
You're very welcome. Donald's job is to keep us all in order. He has the clock. And he's going to make sure that we kind of run along and don't go over time and things like that. We plan that we're not doing all the work up here tonight. Actually, we know that most of the knowledge about Necarne and what needs to happen and what should happen and everything else is actually in the room. So you can see we've got some paper and pens, and Claire, if you go to the next slide there. This is how we're going to go. We have 3 parts to the evening, and the first part is about why we're concerned and why now, right? And myself and Hugh are going to talk to you about that. At the end of it, the second part is about what could and should happen with the future with Necarne, what you think you would like to see happen. Okay, we'll talk a bit about equine therapy, and we'll talk about equestrian, we'll talk about lots of things like that, but we want to hear what your ideas, because we want to be able to take this forward as best as we can, but we need to do it together. And this third part is like, how do we get from A to B? So how do we get from being concerned and where we are at now over to what could and should be? Okay? The speakers for that section are not actually here yet because they're at other meetings, but they'll be here by that time, please goodness. And you can see at each end of each section is like your say section, and you know, when it comes to that point, you know, after you've kind of had a kind of kickstart from us on what the issues are, we've got some very exciting coloured pens and things here and some paper. And so we're really going to invite you to either say things that we can write down or to come up and write down your ideas. Earlier on, some of the people setting up or putting up things and saying that actually there used to be a river there that was blocked, but the river could be unblocked, and you could have fishing and things like that. So we need to build that all up, and we need to bring everybody together and get everybody's heads together on this, because we'll explain in a moment why all of this is under threat at the moment. Okay, right. Ready. Go ahead. So this aspect here, I'm going to talk to you particularly about why we're concerned right now. And the reason we're concerned is the council are currently running an expressions of interest. You probably know this. And that was closed in September. But what happened was that in the process of that, they revealed certain things. They put out criteria, right? Now, it's really important to understand this. But when you have an expression of interest or a tender process, you control that process by the criteria you set. So you could have set a criteria, or they could have set a criteria for the 50% of the marks to go to community use, to restoring it to all the people in the community who want to use it, and the walkers and everyone like that, and put the community in control, and 50% to saving the castle. That's not what they did. They put a very strict criteria on it for the highest rent, the highest deposit, the highest bond, the best financial package, and for tourism. Okay? So they can't, it's a very set process. And they can, when they process the people who have applied now, they can only score against that criteria. So the only things that are going to count are how much money you're putting on the table. And that's basically all it boils down to. And also tourism. Nothing to do with local use, nothing to do with health and well-being, nothing to do with community access. Okay? So 0 score for that. So that would effect mean that it's going to attract, and it has attracted, private individuals. Right? If you watch our Facebook page, you'll know who they are. We're not going to concern ourselves with who they are. We've got nothing against them. It's not their fault or anything like that. We've got no issue with anyone who's actually applied, right? We have an issue with the way that the council set the criteria, because that's what it created. And the fault is with that process. So what in effect it means is that the 5 million of public funds that was invested, there was 4 million put in by the council, and then another 5 million put in, another 1 million put in by DARD, that all of that money and all of that public funds will now potentially go to benefit a private investor. And we don't think that's right. So we also have a problem with the fact that they say that it's okay to abandon the equestrian use. So that means that everything that it was built for and made to do, and that it's needed locally and regionally, it's okay to abandon that. That means also that they are financially exploiting everything that they've neglected. So they failed to maintain the castle, they failed to keep it all up, they failed to maintain the estate, and yet now they want to take a massive rent. Okay, so that's also a difficulty. Okay, next one. So we see zero safeguarding for any community use. It's entirely possible the way they set that criteria and the way they answered the questions. We don't know what's going to happen with any of those, but they have created a situation where the community could be excluded. It's a lottery, right? So we want the process to stop because of that reason. They have no acknowledgement for any rights of ways, and Hugh's going to talk to you about that, right? And there have been many groups of late who used to be able to use that, like the cycling clubs who are represented here this evening. Those groups, wanted to run events. Lots of people have approached the council wanting to run different things, and they have been told, no, you can't do it. Even though the lease between the council and DARD allowed for full recreational use. So the high rent, high deposit, high rates also means that because there's very high overheads being put on them by the way that the system that the council have created, it means that anyone who wants to use it could potentially be very exploited because the overheads have been put on so high. And this actually makes it a risk of it being more unsustainable also. Now, on the good side, it's a non-binding process. They haven't entered into a lease. They now consider the expressions of interest, and they consider those, but there is a clause that says it's non-binding. Okay? So, is that okay? No. They're refusing to answer questions at the moment, right? And that's quite important, and I want to just get a folder here about freedom of information requests. We can't put all this detail up on the screen. Okay, so this gives you another sort of warning sign about the process. In the terms and conditions that are a part of the expression of interest process, they said that all of that was submitted by the bidders was under freedom of information. So everything could be released and there was no liability and there was no information that could be provided by bidders that would be accepted in confidence. So what that says is it should be an open process. And that's very important because this essentially is a community facility. And when you have a community facility and when you have it all paid for by public funds, there should be openness and transparency. So it's not that we are interested in what the bidders said. It was just that we wanted to be able to get them to test to see were they going to be open. Because this is such an impact locally, because there was no safeguarding of community needs. And they responded to say that it was in the public interest that they protected the private investors. And when you read in the press, they talked a lot about protecting the commercial interests, respecting the process. But the problem is that they're asking for the respect and protection for the private investors, but they haven't asked for the respect of the community or the community needs. And we have difficulty with that because we think that this is Irvinestown's recreation facility, among other things, and there is a need for this. And we have a difficulty with that because that should have been, in our mind, protected by the process. They could have done that. They could have put a clause in there that said, you know, community use must still continue. Maybe 50% of the marks go to continuing that. But that's not what actually happened. There was no criteria for that, so therefore there can be no score. So in the media at the moment, they seem to be saying a game of, well, you know, making it look like that what we're trying to do was just really late and that we're just complaining because we should have been in there and it was open to everybody. Open to everybody would have meant a fair and equal score to everybody. That's not what happened. The scoring can only go to the criteria that was set, and that was for money, 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 and tourism. So I'm hoping I've explained what's wrong with the current process in that and what our concerns are. If you go to the next one, Claire. Right. So is there any questions about that particular aspect now, about the freedom of information and the current situation? Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How long have they got to come to their decision about expressions of interest?
Well, they closed on the 16th of September, and in this week's paper they told the Herald that they would come to a decision by the end of November. So effectively we have, as a community, and people who need it, got time now to lobby the councillors, because there is a clause to say it's non-binding, and the councillors have the say in this. At the moment they're saying they can't abandon the process because they started a process, they have to be fair to the bidders. Well, we have this on another issue as well, about them protecting investors because they're afraid of being sued. They're afraid of, you know, people with money who they've attracted because of the criteria that they set, now coming back and suing them or taking a judicial review because they didn't get what they wanted, right? You create situations like this by setting criteria like that. It's nothing personal to do with anybody who applied for that. But the important thing is that we now have a situation where there is actually an opportunity for democracy to roll into action. And by you all coming here tonight, and by us coming together on this is where we really need to, we're trying to empower you, we're trying to give you knowledge and give you information to be able to try and help you now to understand what's going on so that you can, you know, spread the word and everything. But you are voters, we live in a democracy, so that you have to communicate with your councillors and we have to try and get this sorted out. Is there anyone other questions on the expression of interest?
How were the criteria decided in the first place?
That would have been by, we imagine possibly by the civil servants in the council would have led that process, you know, because they're quite used to setting the criteria for tenders and things like that. So we imagine that.